Hello, welcome to the Hero Report podcast. It's been a long time since we sat down to talk, but the release of a new Star Wars film has driven Matt and I back together, him at a very early hour in the morning. How are you there, Matt?
I'm good. It's very hot here, as I was telling you last night. I
Yeah.
don't think that we got below 75 probably.
Oh,
It's 6:45, 7 in the morning, and it's hot already.
yikes. Well, to help cool you down, let's talk about the exceptionally cool Star Wars. We both went to see it as soon as we possibly could. For you, that was what, Thursday morning?
It was Thursday morning my time, yeah. So Wednesday night your time.
And for me, it was Thursday evening my time, which was, I guess, Friday your time. So we've both been very patient. We've been not spoiling this movie for anyone.
Right.
This, of course, will be a spoiler-filled episode, I think. I don't think there's any way to talk about it in the kind of detail that we want to that doesn't include spoilers. So we're telling you ahead of time. If you have not seen Episode 7, The Force Awakens, you'll probably want to wait to listen to this until after you've seen it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We finally get to spoil the movie.
That's right. Well, Matt, let me start here. What were your initial impressions?
Of the movie, of the hero piece.
Let's start with the movie and then move into the hero piece.
I thought it was amazing. I thought it was a real, I don't know, it's a bit cliche, but it was a love letter to the original trilogy. I think it was, I think there were just so many nods to people who had loved the originals, and I think the most important part was that it felt, well, there were two. I think that it felt real, that it was filmed, not with a green screen in every scene, and that there was comedy, that there was snark, and I think that was very much missing from the prequels, but I think very important in the originals. I think it was such an important part of why people liked it. And I think maybe George Lucas didn't realize that people liked it for that.
Yeah, people in our theater laughed. There were good joke lines, good comedy, the interaction between the characters, especially Rey, Finn, and Han Solo. I just thought was terrific. It was a lot of fun, right? It was a fun movie. It reminded you why you liked the originals, because they were adventure movies about good and evil. There were real characters developed in a relatively short period of time, so you felt like you knew something about Finn, for example, pretty quickly after meeting that character. In the same way that you sort of felt that way about Han and Luke and Leia in the original. So, for me, that was really the best thing, right? Is that they got back to having fun and not being this kind of ponderous information delivery vehicle, which in some sense the prequels were, right? They felt like it was like George Lucas had to explain to you how everything happened so that you would get all of this plot, right? It was plot after plot after plot in those. And one of the things that I thought was so interesting about this film is that it wasn't about plot, right? I mean, there are really big plot points that were not explained or discussed, right? We have no more information today, having seen the film, than we did before the film about what happened after the destruction of the second Death Star at Endor. We have no more information about what happened to Han and Leia. We have a little tiny scrap of information about what happened to Luke, but no real detail. I presume some of that will be forthcoming in episode 8. But it treated those questions in some sense as uninteresting. And now I think that for some people, that's going to actually be a big miss, right? You know, not for me, but I think there are some people who just want all of the story, right? They want like the whole universe to be explained as if this were a book, right, or a series of books, but it's not. It's film, and film doesn't operate the same way that books do. I think George Lucas could have written us a terrific book version of the Trade Federation and Darth Sidious's machinations and all that kind of business, galactic politics and all that. You don't get any of that here, and that's why it's a fun adventure story that is going to make $1 bajillion, because it's not mired in the reasons why the First Order exists and why the Republic is there, but not really, and instead there's a resistance, and why Leia is the general of the resistance rather than a politician, right? We don't need that baggage, and it would have bogged this movie down and made it a lot less of an adventure, and as a result, a lot less of a hero story.
Yeah, and I think that reminds me of why Mad Max Fury Road was so successful, and people complained that things weren't explained, but a lot of things just get explained by the characters' reactions to them. You know, it's one line here and one line there, and then you have to extrapolate yourself, and that's how you build a film. You don't, they could have spent a lot of time explaining a lot of things, and you can't do that anywhere other than having two characters talking to each other. And
which is horrible, right? It's horrible. We don't want nobody. I mean, can you imagine if the interactions between Han and Leia had just been, "Hey, do you remember that time when you tried to go back to creating the Galactic Senate and it didn't really work out? So then and she'd say, "Oh yes, I do remember that, and I was very unhappy with the way you acted." And I mean, they yada yada to all of that, right? Which is okay by me. I don't need. I mean, if I really want it, I bet there will be a book, right? And then they also have the opportunity, they can do a one-off movie or whatever. I mean, they're going to be making Star Wars movies now for the next 10 years, easy. And they can, you know, do a little piece with other characters who aren't Han, Luke, and Leia, and tell us about some of the things that were going on in the intervening 30 years, if they want. But I'm okay with this, with the property, the episode properties. I'm okay with them being this, because this is what made the first 2 movies, at least, right, episodes 4 and 5, really great movies. They were not about like the plot issues. They were about the characters and how the characters dealt with the big issues of their identities and about how they fit into this universe where good and evil play a very real role, and people's decisions really impact everything that goes on. So I was, you know, for me, I just had a great time with it, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see what they do next. I'm excited to see Luke come in. I was surprised that there was so little Luke Skywalker in this film. It means, of course, we'll get more. This was Han Solo's film, but yeah. I guess let's talk about the heroism, right? Because we have new heroes, and I think they're very much worth talking about.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the very first movie was famously mapped to the hero's journey through meetings with Joseph Campbell. So there's never any question that it's not a hero's journey movie. And I mean, I think that's what they've returned to, and that was clearly missing from the prequels. But you know, the character of Rey is very much being placed in that Luke Skywalker role in many ways, but one of them being that clear, boring start, getting a call to adventure and refusing the call, which was a very big part of it, and then going on this adventure and meeting people and you know, learning and developing and coming out a different person, which she did in the whole thing. But I think you know, Finn's character as well, there's very clearly a map there as well. What was interesting to me was that that Poe Dameron got nothing really. It was, for me, it felt like he must have been edited out a little bit on the in the editing room, because there was nothing going on there. I mean, he was just the coolest guy you could imagine, and there hasn't been a Star Wars character like that before. It was very flat. But the other two, I think, is what we'll be talking about, right? They were on a hero's journey, and then you know, there was exhibiting heroic behavior throughout it. So, I mean, what were your thoughts there?
So, I agree with all of that. I think that I mean, so if I have one regret, maybe, is that this movie isn't just sort of mapping on, right, or paying homage to Episode 4. It basically is Episode 4 again, with different characters. And I mean, I think that's part of why it was so fun, is because you know, we loved Episode 4, so now we love Episode 7. I think that Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote it, and J.J. Abrams, who directed it, they could have strayed a little bit, right? They could have, especially in the plot points that they used. You know, you can do the hero's journey without also setting, you know, having it the same setting on the desert planet for the Force user, and you know, and so on and so forth. I mean, I think that there were ways that they could have taken a little bit of creative license. It didn't have to just have a bigger Death Star, right? Those are the kind of things that I might have chosen differently if I had a choice to make. That said, you know, I'm also really, so I'm fascinated not just with Finn and Rey, but also with our new bad guy, right? Because I think that there's a lot of potential there to tell us, you know, how someone goes in this direction, right? And I think that you can get not a hero's journey, but I think we can learn a lot about how someone who was, you know, perhaps really promising goes wrong in a way, I'm hopeful, that's better or more interesting than what we saw in episodes 1, 2, and 3, right? Where that was the premise, right? The premise is someone who has so much potential goes wrong. But the reason that it all falls apart doesn't work, right? I mean, it wasn't compelling. And there's the potential, in some sense, because of the acting. I thought Adam Driver was really good. And I think that the potential there, the conflict in his character in particular, gives us real potential to look into not just the hero's journey, but also, in some sense, villainy, right? How someone goes from light to dark. And, you know, they were playing with that at points in this movie where he's clearly very conflicted. He's, you know, a young man who doesn't know what to do. And there was never, unfortunately, with Anakin Skywalker, it either wasn't there or it didn't work, right? When he went to the dark side, he just immediately starts slaughtering children. And this is not that, right? This is someone who is asking for guidance, right? Wants to, you know, wants, in some sense, you know, really has a conflict, right? Wants to be at home, wants to feel a part of something, and isn't. And I think that there's a lot of potential there for something really cool as well, right? Because, you know, I mean, I don't know what else we do with Rey, right? I'm not sure. I mean, she became, in some sense, she became a Jedi really fast,
Right.
much faster than Luke. You know, she was able to take some control over her Force powers in like 10 minutes. Um, so I don't know what else they do with her, and I think that in some sense, you know, she'll have some other underlying conflicts that she'll have to overcome about who her family is and all this kind of business that's yet to come. But I think there's real potential to do more with Poe if they decide to do more, a lot more with Finn, who we saw, right, making a choice between good and evil, right, against all of his better judgment, and he does it twice, which is something, you know, when we talk about heroism, he's making these sort of conscious choices to keep doing the right thing in the face of great risk. And I thought that was really, really interesting. There's potential there to see where he goes next. And as I said, I think there's a lot more that you can do with Adam Driver to see sort of where he comes from and where he's going.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that was when you said a little while ago that it's about good versus evil. I think it has been that, but it's not. I mean, the very first movie was simply that. But after that, it became very. It became very much about those internal battles between the draw of good and evil, and I mean, really the draw towards the dark side. But they flipped this in this with the draw to the light side. So I think that's what made Empire sort of stand up, was that it's not just about good and evil. And I think Han Solo is such a good character for that too, that he has that selfish orientation and changes, you know. And I think I think all of those pieces are going to be very interesting. And I think Rey could easily be tempted towards some partnership with Kylo Ren, if that, you know, there could be all sorts of things to fix the world together, or, you know, the youth, we know what's better for the world, and let's take it on. And there's all sorts of ways to go. But I think, I mean, the thing that stuck out for me was Finn's initial decision to stand against such a uniform crowd. You know, that you have all the things that Zimbardo would design to make somebody do bad things. It's the anonymity. It's the uniform that fits you in with everybody else. It's faceless. It's consequenceless. It's following the system, the direction of the system. And he just pushes back on all of it we're not really sure why, but man, what very clear risks. And even though, and really he is resisting the system. He's not doing it to save anybody. He's just saying, this is wrong and I'm not going to be part of it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I think, well, yeah, you can talk about the second part.
I mean, in what you say there, I think it was really interesting the way that I mean, the First Order is much worse than the Empire.
Yeah.
Right? In terms of presentation, which I think is really interesting, right? It's a new evil for a new time, right? The Empire might have been bad for the 1970s, but it looks tame today, right? I mean, we even had people arguing, you know, in publications in the last 6 months that maybe the Empire wasn't so bad, right? Whereas the very first thing that the troops of the First Order do is a war crime, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it, right? They round up civilians and they murder them all, and that's where Finn draws a line, right? I mean, it's pretty clear he already has problems, right? It seems like he doesn't fit in for whatever reason. They don't really explain it. But here he goes, well, I can't participate in this, right? Despite all my training, despite conditioning, despite whatever, not for me. And I think that's really kind of fascinating that they've made the evil much more evil, you know, because Darth Vader was very, very bad. But in some sense, Ren is worse, right? In terms of, and maybe it's his youth. Maybe it's something about how his training went wrong, and maybe you know, I mean, I mean, there's a kind of fury in him that, in a sense, at least in Episode 4, is lacking in Darth Vader, right? Who is really he's very robotic, and Ren is not robotic at all, right? Despite the mask, despite all of that. He really, I mean, they really took advantage of the fact that he really is very much a boy, right? I mean, he's a young man. In a sense, it's the Anakin from Revenge of the Sith, with all the tantrums, right? But instead of the Hayden Christensen version, these are very sort of controlled and I mean, for my money, very well acted, right? I mean, the presentation is really sophisticated.
Yeah, and that I think that's exactly it. That it's maybe scarier, but it's different to the presentation of Vader, who was very much in control and able to control, and Kylo is very unpredictable and angry and violent. So you know,
and also unconcerned, right? He's unconcerned about others to an extent that is really fascinating. There's no, I mean, maybe we'll start with, I mean, the conflict that he has is a personal conflict in some sense, right? Between what he knows is right and what but in some sense what he wants. You know, the people around him, whether they're his troops or villagers or a person in his kind of mind torture chair, they don't mean much to him, right? They're kind of I don't know, they're auxiliary, right? Like they're the external things that he has to sort of get through as he's figuring out how to get the thing that he wants.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and that as you said, Rey, you know, I think Rey is going to appeal for that simple. She's learning and is a good person and is going to be, you know, the holder of the light side basically, and we've already seen that premonition of her standing up against the Knights of Ren. But it's Kylo's story that's going to be very much more interesting, I think. So what about Finn's? You said a second piece of heroism for Finn. What I think I know what you're talking about, but what's that moment?
I mean, I think he has a couple, right? But the one is that he's ready to leave in the canteen, the cantina. He's ready to the Mos Eisley cantina. That's not Mos Eisley. He's ready to leave and to go live in anonymity, right? And to be safe. And kind of get a regular job and be not who he was, but he can't, right? Ultimately, in some sense, the war comes to him, but then he decides, having had that happen, that he has to go, you know, and participate intimately in a rescue, even though he doesn't really have the training or the necessary capabilities, perhaps. He figures he'll just figure it out. Because he knows that now he has to go be involved. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, so he sees Rey being kidnapped and goes to the rescue.
Yep.
absolutely going against his better judgment, or his less better judgment, maybe.
Yeah, well, and his stated goal, right? Like, I mean, directly against what he just said he was going to do.
Right, right. I mean, I think that the training part's interesting for me, though, because it's expressed that he was raised a stormtrooper, right? And he was clearly he was acting as a soldier on the attack on Jakku. So, I mean, there's a lot of people talking about how he shouldn't have been able to fight against Kylo Ren and all that kind of stuff. But he is a well-trained soldier, so I think that it's not so much that he doesn't know what to do, but it's, I mean, it's still obviously risky to be running back into a battle with TIE fighters and everything.
Yeah. But he also tells Han Solo that his job on the planet had been like sanitation.
Right, but that might be just. I mean, there's soldiers around in the U.S. Army that must be in sanitation as well, right?
Sure. I mean, in particular, he's not particularly well trained to like take down the shields or the reactor or whatever it is they needed to do, right? That's not something he knew a whole lot about.
Right.
But certainly he has. I mean, he has military training. Yeah.
Yep. What was interesting with me with his character was that it was very much his thoughts. It was very much internal decision making, because he clearly didn't understand what life was like outside of being a stormtrooper. All of the misfires in talking to other people, and he just but slowly seemed to fit in. So even that, he wanted to be part of the group. He wanted to be, and maybe that's where some of that compulsion was to make those heroic choices. But yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to talk to Zimbardo about the heroism shown by Finn at the start. That, I mean, it was shown that takes so much courage to do that, the moral courage. But then clearly he was put into quite a bit of physical danger to try to escape as well.
Yeah. The thing that I thought was so interesting about those initial sequences with Finn is that he's presented as almost being ill, right? I mean, he feels badly, right? At least that's the way that they have him look and the way that they have him reacting, right? That he can't catch his breath, he's sweating, he seems very shaken, which is really, I thought, really interesting, right? Because what he's doing, he's making all of these very difficult choices, and you're seeing in some sense the physical toll that it's taking on him. But I think some people might read him as being simply afraid. And I think that might be the biggest mistake you could make in watching the film, right? That it might. I don't see him as being afraid in any way in those situations. I see him as sort of there's like a physical manifestation of the difficulty of the decision that he's making.
Right, and then you don't see that at all with Poe, and that again, and I feel like he was very much the embodiment of that perfect combat hero, and the things that movies get wrong with their heroes, that they're so flawless, they're so glib under mortal threat, and they do everything perfectly. There's no, so I mean, he's sort of another examination of what a hero is too. But I think he's that idol. He's the everybody's looking up to him. He's the greatest pilot in the Resistance, and that was really an interesting presentation to me in comparison with those other two. That here are two people that actually don't want to save the universe. One wants to get home, and one wants to get as far away from home as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have this perfect knight kind of situation, a Galahad who's just flawless.
Yeah, but he's also, I mean, there wasn't anything interesting about him. So
Exactly.
so they either cut things out, or he was allowed to simply vanish for the middle third of the film, if not more, right? I mean, we really only have two big sequences, right? He begins the film, and in a sense, he ends the film, but he's kind of ancillary to what's going on. He's not central to the plot. Uh, and that's, in some sense, that's a lesson, right? I mean, he certainly, I mean, he's the battlefield hero, right? He's unstoppable. He's very good at shooting at targets and flying really well. Although, I mean, Ray also flies very well. He's the best pilot. He's like Achilles, but he doesn't have the thing about Achilles that's interesting, right? Which is the internal struggle about the value of heroism or something. Because in a sense, he's just committed to the cause, right?
Right.
In a way that the other characters who we will end up caring about are not, right? They're not committed to either cause, at least not at the beginning, and so like they don't have that kind of um, uh, you know deep devotion. They have real conflict, and he has none. All he has to do is fly the plane, and he flies the plane.
That's right. So I mean, the other piece of potential or heroism to talk about is Han Solo, and maybe we haven't brought him up because we might start crying. But what do we make of his arc in this story?
So first of all, I thought Harrison Ford was great. I think it's tremendously sad that we have lived basically 30 years without Harrison Ford as this character, because I don't think he's been as good in anything as he has been in these films. I think that there is something about the character of Han Solo that Harrison Ford just, I mean, it's perfect. I mean, it's a joy to watch. Um, in terms of the arc, I mean, it's interesting, right? He goes back to his roots, back to smuggling. He's essentially, he seems to be totally out on politics and on the resistance to the First Order. He seems to be up to his usual, no good, up to his usual difficulties. But the difference, of course, is that he immediately turns on a dime this time, right, and goes back to gallantry. Whereas in Episode 4, it basically takes him the entirety of the film to sort of come around. He's seen a lot more, obviously. He knows about Luke and the Force. But for someone who has had the kind of difficulties that we now know he has had over the past 30 years, he really turns around fast to help Finn and Rey get the droid back to the princess. Which I say that way because, of course, it's the same exact plot as Episode 4. So I thought, I mean, that was interesting. And then, the conclusion is the conclusion. We can say a lot more about that, I guess.
Yeah, I think. I think to a large extent, Harrison Ford created Han Solo, so that's why it fits so much. There's nothing in me that believes George Lucas created that character as presented. He obviously had the broad brushstrokes, but the way that Han swaggers and makes comments, there's no way. And I think he probably had a lot of that similar license for Indiana Jones, and that sums up Harrison Ford's contribution to the world, I think. But
let me stop you, because I don't think he loved Indy the way he loved Han Solo.
Everything that he says in public, though, says that he didn't love Han Solo.
I know, but look at the performance in this film and look at the performance in the last Indiana Jones. Now, some of that might be the writing. Some of that, I mean, who knows? But this, like, I mean, if it wasn't silly to say, I would nominate him for something for this performance. And the last Indiana Jones, I would throw away, right?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
Well, but I think you're right. I mean, it's the writing in that movie was atrocious and very, very on par with the prequels. So, you know, it's like you say, he was given the lines to work with, or given the opportunity to work in this,
Right.
and he wasn't, you know, he wasn't the star, and he never was, and I think that's part of the appeal with Han Solo, is that he wasn't the main hero. He certainly carried this movie, but he still wasn't the one. So I mean, as far as that his I mean, does he sacrifice himself?
No.
Did you get what did you get from that? Why did he do what he did?
Um, I So a couple of things, right? I think as much as he believes now that the Force is real and that the Jedi are an actual thing, his experience with the dark side is virtually non-existent when you compare to Luke, for example, right? Han's only interaction with Darth Vader occurs in Episode 5, and it's very brief, right? The only, I mean, he doesn't really know anything. I mean, as far as we know from the film, right? I mean, he doesn't really know much about what the dark side entails, right, and what it does to a person. And so, I mean, we don't have enough backstory about Ben Solo yet, except that I think we can probably piece together that Luke attempted to train him in the Force, and things did not go well. Um, and then he left, right? He was seduced by this new bad guy, who I suppose we can also talk about in a minute, and he left, right, to join with the First Order. And so his descent into the darkness is also something that Han is not familiar with, right? So I don't think he sacrifices himself. I don't think he knows what's coming. I think that he does what a father would do. That is, he wants to talk to his son, and he thinks that he can restore his son to the family. He doesn't appreciate that he's really. I don't know that he appreciates the tightrope that he's walking.
Right, and I think that there's the parallels in any parent losing their child to whatever, drugs or guns or gangs,
and their guns,
yeah. There's that. I mean, that's such a archetypal story of losing that connection with your child. So I think, I mean, he's obviously experienced that, and it's broken their marriage, and no one in the family died because of it. It was just that they lost him. Mm-hmm. So it was, yeah. I mean, it was an interesting choice for him. My impression when I was watching the first time was that he realized that he was going to do that for Leia, regardless. That he was going to do what she asked. I thought that all the interactions between Leia and Han were amazingly real. That's what ex couples that really loved each other act like, you know. And I think he just, you know, I think we'd been shown that he was really close to the end of his ability to smuggle anymore, because no one in the galaxy trusted him, and they all knew him, and he was doing even more risky things than he normally would. And so that maybe this was it. It was like, right, this is how life ends, is I've got to try to do something good. And I think in that, you know, that maybe that's that parallel with the first movie as well, is even though I don't have to do this, it's the right thing to do. and this time he has a consequence.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's so interesting for me is that this is like, we almost never see Han Solo out of his depth, right? Like, he almost always has a reaction or a response or a way out. You know, and here he doesn't, in part because he thinks, right at the very end, he thinks that he's connected with his son, right? He thinks that I mean, you know, my sense from the interaction, and I've only seen it once. I have to find a time to go see it again. But my sense from the interaction the first time I saw it is that I think what's so heartbreaking is that he's wrong, right? He thinks that he's gotten through to his son, but that's actually the moment when his son is really gone.
Right.
And I think that's for me maybe the most heartbreaking part of the scene. The only person who really knows what Ren is like is Rey, who's watching it, right? Because she's just suffered, right, and come through his attempt at torture. And you know, Han doesn't have any knowledge of that, right? He doesn't really know the kind of depth that this person has sunk to. And so, you know, he thinks that he's gotten through to him in this conversation. The trouble is, again, you talk about people who've lost a child to something, right? Where the child is not dead, but is no longer the same person. A conversation is not. I mean, that's not going to do it, right? That's not going to restore what's happened. And here you really see like Han out of his depth.
Yeah.
There's no.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
There's no bargaining.
He's such a yeah, and he's such a physically reactive kind of guy, and it's that dodging and weaving and chasing a bunch of stormtroopers while yelling loudly, that kind of thing. Or yeah, that's absolutely right. And then it is sad that we missed out on an opportunity to see more Han Solo in our lives, and I can't imagine anything that's going to make me go and see the Han Solo prequel that's supposed to be out in 3 years. I can't imagine going to that. So I mean, we'll see. We'll see.
Yes, you will.
I don't know. It would have to be very, very convincing for me. The actor is going to be a big part of it. I don't know.
Well, mark this down as the time that it would be very hard to imagine him going. We'll see.
We will. So then you said you wanted to talk about Supreme Leader Snoke.
Yeah, we need to talk about the big bad. What's going on?
The interesting thing, yeah. So I mean, I think we talked briefly about this, but there wasn't much explanation of what the current political situation was, which is the complete opposite of the prequels.
Yes.
But we have the Republic and the Senate operating.
Not anymore.
Well, not anymore. At the start of the movie, and then we have clearly this rebel offshoot that is building a mega weapon, who still clearly have power and money to be able to do that. And then we have the sanctioned resistance, which is a weird name for a government entity. But then we have Supreme Leader Snoke, and that title Supreme Leader is a very weird one to have when he's clearly not part of the Senate. And yeah, he was very big bad, and I'm wondering if he's actually very small in real life when we get to meet him, or because of that projection. But yeah, I mean, where on earth does that sit? The Emperor clearly, eventually, was shown to be leading the whole empire, But this guy, I mean, he's leading both Hux and Kylo Ren. So there's something there. I mean, maybe that's it. He created this offshoot.
Right. So
from
I mean, the first time we see the Emperor, he's enormous. He's an enormous hologram, and Darth Vader is kneeling to him, right? So it's the same thing here with the enormous hologram. The question, Leia knows who this guy is. She talks about him. She names him. So it seems clear to me that he is. My guess is he founds the First Order as either as an Imperial remnant or as as a kind of resistance or rebellion to the New Republic. But where he comes from, I think, is a real mystery. And again, I don't know if it matters unless you're someone who just cares a lot about Star Wars lore. I mean, I do, but only if it's interesting. Like, I don't care about Viceroy Newt Gunray and his trade dispute. But I would like. I mean, I'm someone who is really interested in knowing about where Palpatine came from, right? How the senator from Naboo becomes the big bad who, rules the galaxy, at first in secret and then, not. We never found that out, right? In the same way, we may never find out where this Snoke comes from. And maybe I'm okay with that. Of course, if you read the Expanded Universe books, as now no one should because they're now non-canonical, there is a book, right, that gives the Palpatine backstory. And I saw one of those internet rumors floating around that's I'm sure not true, but it connected that Expanded Universe story through the prequels and to Episode 7, right? And that is, of course, with Palpatine's offhand mention of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis. And we don't know anything about Darth Plagueis, except presumably that this was Palpatine's master. That's how the Expanded Universe deals with it. But of course, in that case, everyone assumes that he's dead, right? And in the book about Darth Plagueis, Palpatine does kill him. So who knows, right? Is this Darth Plagueis? Is he some kind of Darth? We don't really know. Do people not use the title of Darth anymore? Has it gone out of fashion? These are the kinds of things we just don't have any information about them. But of course, I'm interested in them because I'm a huge Star Wars nerd.
Well, I think two things. I mean, I think there's he's got a very obvious lightsaber-shaped scar on his forehead, which we've now seen Kylo receive a lightsaber to the face. What a line that stood out for me came from Maz Kanata, who it seems to me people aren't paying much attention to on Reddit and elsewhere, because she told Rey, "Close your eyes and you'll see the Force." I can't remember her exact lines, but then at the end of the movie, Rey closes her eyes and you see the calm come over her, and she gets, she starts fighting better. For some reason, that's been completely overlooked. But the other thing that she said that was key to me was that this is the battle. It's the all-time battle. It's the battle that's always been the good versus evil, the dark versus the light. And she said they are called the something, or called the Empire or the Sith or the new whatever they're called. And to me, that just said, that kind of pushed away this idea that the Sith are always there and will always be there, which to me was a kind of a weird setup anyway, that there were only always two and blah, blah, blah. But but I think that that's given permission to say we're not doing this Sith thing anymore. We're going to have complicated bad guys, and I think the fact that Kylo Ren has not called himself Darth is pretty important. He's clearly idolizing Vader. He's in the same basic group that would idolize Vader, unless for some reason he's being blamed for the loss of everything, which no one would know that he had any change of heart in Return of the Jedi. So, I mean, I think there's some really clear points that the Sith isn't a thing with the end of those two Sith. So, and I mean, I think the idea that he could be that Snoke could be an ex Darth doesn't make sense in Sith lore anyway, right? Because there's only always two, and we've seen the two repeatedly, and he wasn't involved.
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, it's entirely possible that this is something new, but obviously they're Force users, right? I mean, I assume.
Yeah.
So,
he said he could. That was the whole line was, there's been an awakening. Have you noticed it? So I mean, that's his call out that he is a Force user.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see what they do with that character, what we'll learn about that character, you know, over the, you know, in the next installment, which is what, 500 and some days from now. Not that anyone's counting.
Right.
I think it's really, I mean, I think that having this sort of big bad out there is kind of fascinating. I think it gives Luke something to do, right, besides Kylo Ren, because that, I think, is going to be Rey's problem. I may be wrong. It might be Rey plus Leia, but you know, I think that obviously there's got to be something more for Luke to do, presuming that he's become more powerful in the intervening 30 years. He needs somebody who's a bit more maybe worthy of his Force powers, because you know, Ren, while he would have a close familial connection to Luke, clearly at this point is not the Force user that, you know, we would expect Luke to be, since he's relatively easily beaten by someone who's never held a lightsaber before. But
yeah, he was also shot by the incredibly powerful Wookiee crossbow.
Oh, sure. What are you gonna do?
And she's been fighting all her life.
Yeah.
Or we've seen her be a pretty good fighter. I think what's interesting to me, and I dislike Superman for this reason, is that Luke has to be awfully powerful now, and you know, he'd have to be Yoda at least. Well, no, I guess he wouldn't have to be. He wouldn't have to be. But no. The power that Kylo Ren showed of stopping a blaster, he's got some real wild, strong power there. That question of, okay, if Luke's this incredibly powerful Jedi, and that's always going to be the temptation with these kinds of things, is to make them just a bit more powerful than they would have been, you know, in the last installment. So, you know, what's the responsibility for someone like that? Why aren't they directly intervening with the badness that's going on? And same with Snoke, I suppose. Is why just pull the strings if you're a strong Jedi? I don't know. Maybe there's still that chance of you dying. So you know, operating a I don't know how strong, 100,000 strong, million strong force is maybe the better way to get things done.
Well, and also, I mean, I think that there's still the idea of Force users in this galaxy, I mean, there are very, very few of them, right? And so now it's been you know, whatever, 60 years since all of the Jedi were essentially destroyed. Um, Most people, I think, you know, don't know much about the Force or Force users. And so, you know, if it was seen as a kind of outmoded, superstitious kind of religion 30 years ago, imagine what it is now, right? When people thought there was really only Luke Skywalker. Um, so
Yeah, which
it may be that you know, these people who have um, some predilection toward using the Force have to keep themselves hidden or quiet or whatever. Especially, we don't know much about these young Jedi that Luke was supposedly training and what went wrong, except we presume that it involved Ben Solo. Maybe they all were killed, right? I mean, we really don't know. I mean, why has Luke disappeared into a self-imposed exile? It can't. I don't think
right.
it was simply because things went badly with his nephew, right? But there's probably a little bit more to it. And so, you know, I think that you know, to be a Force user in this galaxy at this point is to, you know, is to be an outcast.
Yeah, and that, I mean, the whole Force availability brings up some interesting questions from Jedi too, because Yoda said that there was only one more. There was not that was it, and then within what 10 years, Luke's running a Jedi training center with a bunch of young Jedi, and it'll be interesting to hear the reasoning behind Leia not training, unless she did, and we just weren't privy to it this time. But you know, she's clearly got that sensitivity.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, presumably, right. There are two Skywalkers, right? So what Yoda knows and what Yoda says is that there's another Skywalker, right? He doesn't say there are no other Force users. And there were always children, right? I mean, the Jedi Academy was lousy with younglings for Anakin to slaughter with his lightsaber. So, I mean, they were always plucking kids out of like obscure places, taking them away from their families and locking them up with an alien to teach them how to dodge blaster fire. You know, so, you know, presumably even during the height of the Empire, presumably children were still being born with some sensitivity to the Force, right? I mean, I try to ignore episode 1 as completely as I can, but presumably those midichlorians are floating around there, infecting people's bloodstreams or whatever it is that they do.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope we'll never hear about that again, but, you know, it still exists. So, you know, there's always going to be more of these people, and what they, you know, without training, a lot of them, nothing happens. But it's also possible that some people understand their sensitivity to the Force as they get a little bit older, and you know, and may try to use that power in some way or other.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's this idea that the Skywalker bloodline is the one that's super powerful.
Right. Well, because of the virgin birth.
Right. Yes. Well, I was very glad to see that there was not a lot of reference to the prequels.
Was there any?
Well, there was the banner at Manada's cantina. As they walked up, there was a banner from one of the pod races or something, and then there were, I mean, there was the mention of the clone army, but that's what we understood stormtroopers were from the originals, wasn't it?
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I missed the pod racing banner.
Yeah, well, you had no reason to see it. I just remember reading about it when one of the trailers came out.
Oh yeah, the old Bunta Eve classic.
Something like that, yeah.
Horrible. Yeah. I have a question for you, and then we should probably wrap up.
Yes.
Maz, you know, with the eyes, and
yep.
That was Lupita Nyong'o, yeah.
Yes.
That's an odd choice.
In what way?
I'm saying you cast really one of the most beautiful women in the world in your film, and you don't actually put her in the film. It's an odd choice.
Yeah. Well, they made Daniel Craig a stormtrooper.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was just like, let me be in your movie, and they're like, you can put on this helmet.
Don't you think every one of the actors was along those lines? Like, I mean, yes, I'll do your Star Wars movie.
I'm sure maybe Robert De Niro is a stormtrooper too. Who knows, right? I mean, allegedly, Brienne of Tarth was in this film. I mean, we wouldn't know if that was true or not.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Those were some odd choices because there was a lot of buildup about these actors and and they're like, we've got all this amazing cast, many of whom you will not see. I thought that was very unusual.
Well, I mean, if Star Wars has never been about the star power, though. I mean, which is another problem with the prequels. But I think that it came from humble beginnings, and I think that was a great piece around this too. They could have hired any number of actors to play those new 3 characters, and the most famous of them got the kind of crappy part. The one that's been getting some buzz was the one with no real character.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's right. I just I guess I expected more out of those scenes in the cantina anyway. I thought they were a little bit odd. I think the most interesting part of it was in the basement under the cantina when Rey discovers the lightsaber. But all the business about looking into the eyes and seeing other people's eyes, I think there could have been a lot more to it. I think there could have been a lot more. I mean, there could have been a lot more discussion about who this person was, right?
Right.
Why we haven't ever heard of such a person before. But this is obviously someone who's been around for, I mean, as long as Yoda, right? I mean, right. This is someone with a 1,000-year history. I'm still waiting for the movie that takes us back 1,000 years, right? That's the movie I've written in my head, like the young Yoda and maybe this Maz and some other interesting characters, right? I'm ready for that, but. Right. I think we probably have a while to wait.
Hopefully. All right. So we should, it's been 10 months since our last episode. We should probably do another one within 10 months.
Yep, that's a good idea. Basically, our review is that everyone should go and see this film more than once. There's a lot going on in it. There's a lot that I think we're going to get out of it. If you're interested in heroism, if you're interested in the hero's journey, if you're interested in questions of morality, obviously this movie delivers. Plus, it has just a lot of sort of fun, right? I think you said there's snark, there are good zingers, there's just and some great battle sequences that I think that are better than anything we've had in any of the Star Wars films.
Yep.
So it's just a very entertaining movie. Even if you are not a Star Wars fan, I think you'll enjoy it, which is a funny thing to say about the most anticipated Star Wars film. I'm excited. I know we're getting another Star Wars movie in a year. That's Rogue One. It'll be interesting to see what they do with that. My excitement. I feel like I was not let down. I thought I got myself too excited, but I think it was just right.
Yep, agreed. All right. Well, we'll leave it here and come back again soon.
Okay. May the Force be with you.
And with you.
See you later.
Bye.